what are the best rogue decks in Yu-Gi-Oh? Big dog, I am going to be ranking some of the most popular and your favorite rogue decks on the tier list, all the way from the top rogue to last week's Thanksgiving food. Hey big dog, it's giving. It's just not giving wins. Of course, big dog, you already know. I hope that's your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. Bang! Big dog, so the criteria for this tier list is incredibly simple. I'm going to be ranking these decks on how powerful they are with no budget in mind, you just going full out to make these decks as competitive as possible. And of course, big dog, I will be making a budget tier list for the more money-conscious person, but this one is for rogue Yu-Gi-Oh decks and players that want to take these decks to the max. Let's go ahead and start off with ABC. This is a combo deck that can make some really powerful monsters like Therion King Regulus and ABC Dragon Buster, but I think one of its biggest plays is using IP Masquerena to make monsters like Appaloosa or SP Little Knight on your opponent's turn while gaining the effects of your ABC Union monsters. Unfortunately, I think that ABC isn't a takes a good pilot. I think that there are better combo Yu-Gi-Oh decks right now that would be worth your money, but also ABC loses to the exact same thing that some of the other combo decks do, which makes it a deck that doesn't necessarily stand out outside of those things that I mentioned. But if you genuinely love this deck and you stick to your ABCs, I think the correct pilot can take this and do some crazy things with it. Sharks actually did get some really good support in Age of Overlord. The Armored Exceed cards are gonna go crazy, allowing this deck to make one card Bahamut Sharks, but also potentially F-Zeros and other negations alike. I would say that this takes a really good pilot right now. The biggest problem with this deck is that we only got one Exceed Armored card. Konami, what are you doing? Like you literally messed up all of the combos I just said by giving us one Exceed Armored card. Any other Exceed Armored card actually does allow this deck to unlock its potential and go full combo, but for right now, you're gonna have to big brain your way through a lot of ridiculous stuff. Centurion, I'm actually really excited about this because this particular tier list is not only post the Fire King structure deck, but also post Valiant Smasher. We haven't had any big events just of yet, but I think Centurion will be a top rogue Yu-Gi-Oh deck, if not maybe off the rogue tier list very soon. I don't know, it's just something about one card Red Dragon Archfiend King Calamities that get me with this deck and make me think that it's a little better than what players are giving it credit. But one thing I do want to talk about is that even without the King Calamity lock, cards like Cosmic Blazar Dragon are actually incredibly good, and this deck can summon them easily. I talked about Dinos in yesterday's video and why I think that it's a good deck. I also say it could be a copium take. The good thing about Dino, combo heavy format, oh my god, Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, we eat those. The bad thing about Dino, bricks. I do think that players are figuring out that brick portion by dropping cards like the Scrap Engine, so I'm gonna put it in solid choice. If you do find a way to fix this deck's consistency issues, oh my god, it's actually kind of crazy. And if you decide to play for that super huge combo, you're probably gonna brick a little bit. It's almost really weird, but I think dragons mathematically would be considered rogue. They've actually done incredibly well despite players not playing them. It is a top rogue Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Now again, in yesterday's video, I talked about some huge changes that this deck had to undergo. Losing Bestial Magnamud and Chaos Space was huge, but it being able to recover and turn itself into a powerhouse synchro summoning Black Atlas Yu-Gi-Oh deck is pretty cool. I'm gonna put it in top rogue. This is a deck that players just 100% sleep on until it catches them slipping. Once it does, it could be a very bad time. Drytrons, for some reason, don't get a lot of love. I mean, I guess it's fair. It's comparable to a Flaundereese player. This deck's claim to flame is floodgating your opponent through cards like Vanity's Ruler and the Draco Overlord Ritual Monster. Yeah, if there was an under a bus, I would put it there, but that's just my bias talking. I think Drytron is actually a solid choice. As you guys already know, special summoning normally is the name of the game, and this deck can really shut that down. And also seemingly that Link monsters get even more ridiculous, allowing Drytron monsters to get themselves off the field. I think it's a really good choice for a player that wants to play a ritual deck. Fire Kings, my boy. Okay, statistically, there is no stats on this Yu-Gi-Oh deck as of making this video, and we won't get any for a couple of weeks. But seriously, Fire Kings, there is so much potential. It's big cooking. I think it is the epitome of mad potential. This deck at first sight may not look like one of the better decks in the game, but to be honest with you, looking at some of the decks in the game, they don't look like it either. I will say, once this deck starts going, it is incredibly hard to put that flame out, and being able to continuously lose your monsters can be incredibly frustrating. Now, unfortunately, I do feel really bad for most Runic decks. Typically, when there's a lot of combo decks, the Runic decks don't seem to be as powerful. I don't think that this deck is bad per se, but I would put it in takes a good pilot. The Runic cards never seem to give you enough advantage, and players are over-prepared for what you want to do with that particular avenue. The Fur Hire monsters aren't necessarily bad, but again, players are actually really prepared for a lot of monster effects, which means that this deck can struggle. Galaxy Eyes, my boy. All right. This is definitely the turkey that's still in my refrigerator right now. Bro, it's not a terrible Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Just like how that turkey was pretty bad. I'm sorry, Bird. I guess she can't make turkey. I think one of the biggest problems with Galaxy Eyes is that it is a combo deck that requires your entire hand and makes a board that is less rewarding than some of the other combo decks. But don't get me wrong, this deck is incredibly fun to play. I'll never take that away from them. You guys are actually going to be surprised where I put Generaider. It's actually a good budget deck that I'll be talking about very soon. I think that Generaider is mad potential, my boy. There's going to be a little bit more testing that needs to be had with Generaider, but Runic Generaider is actually crazy. It is built on being able to rip off 3 cards out of your opponent's hand, more cards if they decided to try to hand trap you. And the best thing about this deck is that it doesn't necessarily use the Runic cards for the way that some of the other Runic deck does. It just wants to summon the level 9 monster to the field. So that alleviates a lot of pressure that the Runic cards have to do to be able to make a board. Now again, big dog, I'm gonna do more researching and more testing with this particular Yu-Gi-Oh deck, but I think that it has a lot of potential, and I'll update you on the next tier list. Gold Pride P.U.N.K. Okay, so there's actually a lot that I want to unpackage for this deck. The good thing about Gold Pride P.U.N.K is that it can make hand interruptions look incredibly silly. It can also allow you to draw a lot of hand interruptions yourself to be able to stop your opponent. The bad thing about Gold Pride P.U.N.K, I don't think this deck can play very well going second into some of those combo boards. I'm really torn about this deck, and I haven't seen a lot of placings for it. I'm gonna drop it down to mad potential as opposed from our last tier list. I think that there's still some hidden gems for this deck to be really powerful and some cool interactions, but I'm not as confident as I once was before. TJ just finished taking Dark World in our last vlog video, and he has some really interesting finds. Yep, that's about an interesting find as you can get. I think the biggest problem with Dark World is that we are in a combo format. I gotta drop this deck from Solid Choice that takes a good pilot because just about everybody and their mother is either mainboarding Droll Lock Bird or siding Droll Lock Bird. And not to mention the dimension shifters right now. This deck is down bad because of players being able to avidly counter this deck. I think that heroes actually have some pretty decent potential. Mass Hero Dark Law is pretty much dimensional shifter, which can ruin a lot of decks. I mean, it don't ruin them all, but those that it don't ruin, it has a one-sided skill drain in Destiny Hero Plasma. The only thing that would give me pause about this particular deck is Nibiru the Primal Being, but there is ways for a skilled player to be able to play around that. I think mad potential because it does have cards that can carry. Yeah, you guys aren't gonna like where I put Kashtira. So Kashtira Riceheart is banned, but yo, hold on, hear me out. Kashtira Birth is still not on the ban list. That is a genuinely problematic card. Kashtira is actually one of those really interesting Yu-Gi-Oh decks. They have a ton of crazy good Yu-Gi-Oh effects that can sustain them. They just don't have the most busted card in the entire game that works the entire format. Come on, guys, we all fear Kashtira Fenrir. Imagine a deck that can not only keep on recycling Kashtira Fenrir, but has other cards to be able to check your extra deck and the cards inside of your deck and get rid of them. I think Kashtira is a lot better than what people are giving it credit. My brothers in Christ, if you thought that I was being harsh on Marincess, you're not gonna like me. So Marincess is in a really weird spot. I would say one of the best properties for Marincess is being able to play those solid hand interruptions. That could slow your opponent down, but if they are allowed to make any type of board, holy God, you're cooked. I would say Marincess takes a really good pilot to be able to play. Marincess players, I know you're secret guys. You're secretly Exosister and Mommy Milkers lovers. I've been watching you. Do not kill me when I say that it takes an incredibly talented player to be able to play this deck well. I personally think though, if you do go first with Marincess, you're on easy street. It's just that going second problem that needs to be solved for this deck. I would also say that Mathmech isn't in a great spot, unlike its Master Duel counterpart, and it's actually a good reason. Mathmech Circulars at 1. They actually decided to hit the real guard. To be honest with you guys, if Mathmech Circular was at any more than 1, then I think that this deck is crazy good. Probably one of the best decks inside of Yu-Gi-Oh! So it's pretty fair that it is limited in the TCG. Memento! This deck can put up 5 negations. 5 negations of ass, oh my god. Thanksgiving leftovers for real. I think in the future when we get more of those Memento Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, maybe a retrade of Mammoth Graveyard or something, this deck will be a lot more powerful. But right now, no, would not. Using all of your resources to make Memento a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck is like putting a lawnmower engine in a Ferrari. It'll look nice. Nice enough for you to lose. I still gotta say Mikanko is a solid choice Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. It didn't pop off how we expected to, but it's still a really powerful and respected Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck that if you don't prepare for it, yeah, giving your opponent an Acid Golem is pretty cringe, but I mean, come on, there's been worse in Yu-Gi-Oh!, right? At least that card actually allows you to play, unlike the gimmick puppet lock. Rika has solidified itself as a solid choice Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. It's pretty decent against combo because it does have Gamma Seal like Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards once you activate your Rika Field spell, and can set up a combo that's not only nice, but also immune to board-breaking combo cards like Super Polymerization. Phantom Knight is another deck that is really good right now. This is one of the more slept-on Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks that not a lot of players are paying attention to. Phantom Knight's Fog Blade is incredibly powerful because Monster Negation is incredibly powerful. But instead of having 6 to 9 monster negations between your Ashes, your Infinite Impermanence, and Ghost Mourners, this one kinda has 12 plus, and a way to easily win games with Arc Rebellion. I gotta say, the Horus cards actually did a number with this deck. It's pretty good. Salamangreats, my boy. It's the best deck. Let's go. Top road, you know. Salamangreats are actually incredibly good. We talked about this in yesterday's video as well. Fire recovery actually does help a lot with the Nibiru problem, meaning that Salamangreats can play a ton of hand traps and completely shut down the opponent, but against combo decks, being able to play cards like Rivalry and Gozen and actually lock your opponent out is pretty good. I would say right now that Salamangreats is probably the best Cyberse deck, but that's because it's pretty decent at going second. It also doesn't have anything hit on the forbidden list. Spright is down bad, but I would never disregard Spright. I think it's mad potential right here. Big problem with Spright is when they actually summon monsters that are a threat, you kind of just fold. But the good thing about Spright is that it is so easy to place it inside of other decks. On the top of my head, I've seen Tri-Brigade Spright, I've seen Live Twin Spright, I've seen Melfi Spright. So many different variants of this deck, it's really hard to keep it down. Superheavy Samurai, a lot of players have given up hope on this deck. I have been destroyed by this deck by top Yu-Gi-Oh! Players. They have shown me that no, this deck is not bad. Players are just not using it. I wouldn't necessarily say it's one of the best combo Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks in the game, but being able to play all of those hand interruptions and not really worry because this deck is still 1 to 2 card combos is still pretty cool. Sword Soul! The Ways of the Sword. Yeah, takes a good pilot. Sword Soul's biggest problem, outside of being almost 3-year-old Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck, I mean, that's actually its biggest problem. The deck is incredibly power crept and needs support. I don't think that it's a terrible deck, but if you're investing all of your resources, there's better decks to play. Really good budget deck though. TGs. Yeah, my boy, you might as well just give this up. TGs are kind of like Sword Soul. They're not necessarily a terrible Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. The problem with TGs is that you're better off using those resources for other decks. And if you really want to go back and forth, if you think TGs are worth it, the Diabell Star engine is almost $200. That's enough to probably play any of these other decks just listed, not just that engine. Now, I would say if you already have the Diabell Star engine and you want to try something new, TGs may be something that you can dabble with, but it's literally a worse Centurion deck. We actually experimented with a pure Therion deck, and the results were actually favorable. I would still say takes a really good pilot. You guys should definitely go ahead and check out the Therion deck profile that I did. It's actually a really fun deck to play. It has some really cool things going for it and can play through some disruptions. The problem is that there isn't enough hands-on deck to prove that this deck is a lot better than what you think. Since we already have decks like Spright, Tri-Brigade at map potential, we're just going to say this is going to be a Lyraless Tri-Brigade or a pure Tri-Brigade. Don't do it. Bro, I know you like birds, but this is not the leftovers Thanksgiving you want. Tri-Brigades were incredibly power crept, just like how Umi is too. So before you guys say this deck is an incredibly good Floodgate deck, some of these other decks are also great Floodgate decks, but they also have other things that allow them to play Yu-Gi-Oh! And make great boards outside of the Floodgate in case it doesn't work. Vaalmonica. Yeah, that's probably the apple cider. We're gonna put it in Thanksgiving leftovers, big dog. Vaalmonica looks like a deck that could compete with the right support, but for right now, it ain't worth it. You guys should really check out my video how I actually use some really rogue Yu-Gi-Oh cards to show you how powerful Vanquish Soul is. I would say that it's a top rogue Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and it's probably one of the best rogue Yu-Gi-Oh decks out of this entire tier list. Vanquish Soul Snow Devil is an crazy good card that allows you to wipe boards, but also, if you play Vanquish Soul right, the only thing that stops you is bricking. Hey, but sometimes you be looking at your opponent all bricked up and they scoop. Pause.
Take 5.
I don't even know why Watts are here, guys. I had so much hype for him and I gotta eat crow. Yeah, Thanksgiving leftover. This deck is just not good. And that's all that I have for the Rogue tier list for December 2023, the last Rogue tier list of the year. I'm actually incredibly excited to see what you guys have to say about this tier list. Let me know if there's something that I got right, got wrong. Maybe there's something that I missed or a tier list you want to see. As always, big dog, I hope you're having an amazing day. And if you want to see more TheCaliEffect content, be sure to check out these videos so I can catch you on the next one.